I'm going to bury the lead and tell you that I do not sing. I do not play an instrument. I was never in a band of any kind. But I will be dropping lots of names of rock stars and rock bands. I don't think I will come in second or third place because this one started and that one went second. But you know what? Let's keep count. Together. Let's do it. I call this poser. And the reason I call it that is because my story is about being cool, which I was not. My singular focus in my teen years and my early 20s was that I just wanted to be cool, you guys. I just wanted to be cool, or at least I wanted people to think I was cool, okay? I figured if I could somehow work that out, everything else would just work itself out. It would just fall into place, like the popularity and the attention from boys and the job at the cool McDonald's. That would all just magically line up if I could get people to think I was cool. Because I had been raised in an uber conservative Christian right-wing / military household, and I lived a very sheltered life. And when I went to the college at the University of Tennessee, go Volunteers, Big Orange Crush, I discovered that Christians were the worst people I'd ever met. No offense to any Christians here in this room. I'm sure you're lovely people. I haven't met you. But in the late 80s in Knoxville, Tennessee, when your roommate is a gay homosexual, Christians were pretty effing terrible. Conversely, the kids who drank beer and wore ripped jeans and Converse tennis shoes who went to see Red Hot Chili Peppers, U2, and Hoodoo Guru were the best. And we're at 3. They were the funniest and the most irreverent and the most rebellious and questioning of authority. They were everything I wanted to be. So I shaved the side of my head, and I wore a lot of vintage dresses and rhinestones and ripped tights and Doc Martens, and I went to a lot of clubs that played a lot of rock and roll. And the moment I thought I had reached my coolness pinnacle was the night I invited the band The Circle Jerks, we're at 4, and their entourage back to the apartment I shared with 2 other people. One of whom was not pleased when the police were called and the party was disbanded, but I was, because I had earned my cool stripes. And with this win in my pocket and $800 in my bank account, I moved to Los Angeles, where I got a job at a super hip restaurant on Melrose Avenue called Melon Rose's Coffee Shop. Originally, it was open 24 hours, which meant around 2 a.m. when all the bars were closed and the clubs were closed and the concerts were over, it would just be overrun with concert goers and various rock stars. And that is when I quickly learned that I was not only cool, but I wasn't even cool adjacent. I was what we in the 90s called a poser. And this was illustrated by the fact that I was thoroughly oblivious to Chris Cornell from Soundgarden and Henry Rollins from Black Flag sitting at my counter, and we're at 8. Lucky for me, not getting starry-eyed and fangirl about these rock stars made me seem aloof and cool. I was not. But I kept the truth of that matter under my vintage cabbie hat. So one evening in the early 90s, my coworker Sarah ran into the Melon Rose's kitchen and said in a very delighted whisper, "Dick Rude and Kevin the Nerd are here." And I was like, cool. And she was so angry. And she was like, "Dick Rude and Kevin the Nerd from Repo Man? Let's get sushi and not pay? Feeling 7-Up? Any of this ringing a bell?" And I had to admit that I had not seen Repo Man. And so she furiously said, "Well, they're here and they're in your fucking section and table 2. So I went to greet them. Punk rock legend Xander Schloss played Kevin the Nerd in Repo Man, and we're at 9. And during our first conversation, I found out that he was the bass player for Thelonious Monster. If you do know who Xander is, Murray, you will agree that he was not what one would call conventionally handsome. But he was tall, and he was talented, and he had an extreme cool about him, because he just didn't care if anyone thought he was cool, which made him the coolest. And even when he passed out in the booth at 3 o'clock in the morning, he always had an air of cool. And I was drawn to him because all I wanted to be was thought of as cool. And wouldn't you know it, I found out that in addition to Thelonious Monster, Xander had played bass for, anyone want to guess? The Circle Jerks. And so I said to him, oh my God, you played for the Circle. You partied at my apartment in Knoxville, Tennessee when you played UT. And he said, I partied at a lot of apartments in Knoxville. You're gonna have to be more specific. And I said I had a very big vintage hat on with little tiny white flowers on it. And he went, oh yeah, and the police came. Okay, so he remembered partying in my apartment, okay? And so I was like, I said, okay, so let's recap. He was tall, he was talented, he partied at my apartment in Tennessee. My name was Alex, his name was Xander, our couple name would be Alexander. And I considered this kismet and not coincidence, and I, quick like lightning, developed an obsessive crush on Xander Schloss. I had a crush on him, and he and Dick thought of me as their mascot. Not a groupie, since I wasn't trying to sleep with rock stars because I was oblivious to who the rock stars were, but a mascot with a very good-looking friend named Sarah who got us invited to concerts and parties. So, cut two. Sarah and I went to see Dick perform in his band that was called Two Free Stooges. Now we're at 12. We didn't count Dick before because he was an actor. But now we find out he's the rock star. So we go see this, and it was fantastic. And Dick was funny, and he was great. But I was there because I knew Xander would be there. And we drank heavily, unlike Mr. Jenkins, who's gone now. Other substances were also imbibed. Xander needed a ride home. He couldn't drive, and I volunteered. And when I dropped him off, much making out took place. And we went all the way to second base. And he invited me in, but not being cool, I said, yeah, I don't sleep with dudes on the first date. And he said, well, lucky for us, this wasn't a date. And I, like the cool girl I went, au contraire, mon frère. And then we both laughed the laugh of the drunken. And for a few days, I floated on air because I'd made out with a Xander Schloss. But then Xander came back in the restaurant and would not look me in the face. And so I spent some time convincing myself of the next three things. One, this is fantastic, he remembers making out with me. 2, well, he can't look at me because he's so into me that he'd be embarrassed and his friends would tell and they'd give him shit. So that's why he can't look at me. And 3, oh, he just wants me to be cool. All right, I can do that, I can be cool. So I convinced myself of this for days and days. So when I finally came to terms with the fact that there would not be a follow-up smooch session, I became obsessed with rekindling a friendship in the way that all cool girls do, don't they? Let's be friends, come on, let's be friends. My opportunity came at some fancy party at some fancy house in the hills that belonged to some fancy person whose name I, again, was oblivious to. And I literally looked right past Perry Farrell and Dave Navarro because I was looking for Xander, and we're at 14. I found Xander, and I finally asked him if we could have a conversation. He got that look on his face that said, oh, damn. But he was very kind to me, and he apologized for making out with me, which wasn't humiliating at all. He then said he had a girlfriend in Atlanta, which sounded very much to me like I have a girlfriend in Canada, but he actually had a girlfriend in Atlanta, and I'm guessing in several other cities as well. So I said, okay, do you feel better now? Can we be friends again? I mean, it's not like I bore your child or some shit. We just made out in some uncomfortable bucket seats. And he agreed and hugged me. He was very cool about it, but we were never, again, what we had been before the Max session. And I think it's because he realized I wasn't cool. So I ran into Xander a handful of years later at a ball called Smalls. Anybody remember? At the corner of Gower and Melrose. And I was with my then boyfriend, and Xander was with his gorgeous girlfriend, probably from Atlanta. And he and I hugged, and we made some small talk, and I walked away, and I never saw him again in person. Cut to 10 years ago. Not in the 90s anymore. 10 years ago, I break up with my husband. I move into a friend's duplex, and while cleaning out the downstairs closet, I come upon a disc of photos, and I think you know where this is going. That's right. On this disc of photos were pictures of Xander Schloss and his gorgeous girlfriend. And I considered this kismet and not coincidence. So I found his email, and I reached out, and I told him the whole story. And then he chose not to respond. And then 10 years after that, Marina approached me about doing this show. So, of course, I reached out to him again to tell him I was doing the show. I invited him, sent a flyer. He chose not to respond. And here's what I learned. 1, when you only have time to drop 14 names of rock stars with whom you've come into contact, you will choose to cut Black Francis from the Pixies and Billy Gibbons and Dusty Hill from ZZ Top, and now we're at 19. 2, sometimes coincidence is just coincidence and doesn't have any deeper meaning. You should probably let it go. 3, who you are in your 20s may not have any bearing on or resemblance to who you will become when you are, how dare you ask me, years old. And 4, you will never be cool as long as you give a shit if anybody thinks you're cool. If I've learned nothing from Xander Schloss, I learned that, and now so have you. But don't thank me, thank Xander Schloss, although he will likely choose not to respond.